June 6, 1944. 15 minutes past midnight. In the hedgerows of Normandy, a German sentry from the 91st Air Landing Division stopped pacing. He tilted his head back, listening to a low, throbbing hum vibrating through the overcast sky. It wasn't the high-pitched whine of fighters. It was the deep, rhythmic drone of heavy transport engines. Hundreds of them. Suddenly, the clouds broke open. Not with rain, but with dark, silk shapes plummeting toward the earth. For the SS Officers and Wehrmacht commanders stationed in the Cotentin Peninsula, this was the moment the nightmare began, though they didn't know it yet. They were sitting in converted French chateaux, drinking wine, believing the storm outside would protect them from any invasion that night. The Atlantic Wall was facing the sea. The heavy guns, the machine gun nests, the bunkers, they were all pointed at the English Channel. They were ready for ships. They were not ready for an army to fall on their heads from the sky, landing in their backyards, cutting their telephone lines, and turning the peaceful French countryside into a chaotic kill zone. The first reports that reached the desk of General Erich Marx, commander of the 84th Corps, were fragmented and confusing. Enemy paratroopers sighted near Sainte-Mère-Église. Straw dummies exploding in the fields. Saboteurs cutting the rail lines. At first, the German command laughed. They dismissed it. They thought these were desperate commando raids, a distraction, maybe a supply drop for the French resistance gone wrong. They couldn't conceive that the Allies would drop 13,000 men into the dark, swirling winds of a storm. They didn't realize that while they were staring at the beaches, the invasion had already started behind them. Before we go to the next chapter, I want to ask you to subscribe right now and become a member of this channel. Do it so you never miss moments like this. Moments where we tell the truth in a calm, clear way. If thousands of you are watching, I hope all 1,000 of you join us, because this community is growing, and your presence truly matters here. So let's get back to the command bunker. To understand the panic that would set in later, you first have to understand the arrogance of the SS and the German high command in those early morning hours. The German military machine was built on order, precision, and clear lines of battle. The SS, in particular, viewed themselves as the elite, the unshakable guardians of the Reich. When the first phone started ringing at 1 a.m., the reaction wasn't fear, it was annoyance. Imagine the mindset. You are an SS Obersturmbannführer. You believe the real invasion is coming at the Pas de Calais, hundreds of miles away, because that's what the geography dictates. You believe the weather is too terrible for any sane commander to launch an airborne assault. So when a breathless lieutenant calls you to say there are Americans in the cabbage patch 3 miles inland, you don't call Berlin. You tell the lieutenant to go round them up and stop bothering you. This dismissal was their fatal error. The reports were messy because the drop called was messy. The American 101st and 82nd Airborne had been scattered all over the peninsula by heavy cloud cover and intense anti-aircraft fire. Units were mixed up. Men were miles from their drop zones. To the German mind, which thought in terms of cohesive units and precise tactics, this looked like a botched raid. It looked like a failure. General Wilhelm Fahle, the commander of the 91st Air Landing Division, the exact unit trained to fight paratroopers, was actually on his way to a wargame exercise in Rennes. When he heard the reports of drops, he turned his car around to head back to his headquarters, thinking he would simply organize a cleanup operation of a few stray commando teams. He never made it. He was ambushed and killed by American paratroopers in the dark. The German command structure was losing its eyes and ears before they even knew they were in a fight. They were trying to apply conventional logic to a chaotic situation. They assumed the Americans were lost. They didn't realize that a lost paratrooper with a Thompson submachine gun and a packet of C4 is still a lethal weapon, especially when there are thousands of them roaming around your supply lines. But there was something else happening that night. Something even stranger that convinced the SS this wasn't the real invasion. The SS officers prided themselves on intelligence, on seeing through deceptions. But on the night of June 6th, Their own intelligence was being weaponized against them in a way that sounds almost ridiculous today. As reports flooded into the 7th Army headquarters, commanders were receiving contradictory information. One sector reported a massive drop of thousands of men. Another sector 10 miles away reported a heavy drop that turned out to be silence. No shooting, no movement, just parachutes on the ground. This was Operation Titanic. The Allies had dropped hundreds of rubber dummies, nicknamed Ruperts, alongside the real paratroopers. These dolls were equipped with timed firecrackers that mimicked the sound of rifle fire upon landing. Put yourself in the boots of a German patrol leader. You see parachutes falling. You hear the crack, crack, crack of small arms fire. You radio your commander. Heavy enemy airborne landing in Sector 4. Send reinforcements immediately. The commander pulls reserves from a critical bridge to defend Sector 4. The patrol creeps forward, ready to engage the enemy, and finds rubber dolls burning in the grass. The SS officers were furious. They filled the radio waves with angry shouting, "It's a trick! They are phantoms! Ignore the reports!" But this created a boy who cried wolf scenario. When the real reports came in, reports of the 101st Airborne seizing the causeways behind Utah Beach, the commanders hesitated. Was this another trick? Were these more dolls? That hesitation was the currency the Allies were buying. Every minute an SS Panzer commander spent debating whether a report was real was a minute the Americans used to dig in. The confusion was absolute. By 2 a.m., the German map of Normandy was covered in enemy-sighted pins, but half of them were ghosts. The German military computer, their brain, was being flooded with junk data, and while they were trying to sort the real from the fake, the real paratroopers were cutting the wires that held the German defense together. We often think of warfare as shooting, but at the command level, warfare is talking. If you can't talk to your troops, you don't have an army, you just have a mob. By 3 a.m., the German command in Normandy was going deaf and blind. The French resistance had coordinated with the airborne drops to execute Plan Violet, the systematic cutting of German telephone and telegraph cables. The SS relied heavily on landlines because they knew their radio codes had been compromised in the past, though they didn't know the extent of Ultra. They preferred the security of a wire. Suddenly, those wires were dead. General Marks at the 84th Corps headquarters in St. Lo was trying to get a clear picture of the Cotentin Peninsula. He picked up the phone to call the 709th Division. Dead air. He tried the 91st. Dead air. He was forced to rely on runners and radio dispatches that were increasingly frantic and isolated. The intercepts from this period are chilling. You hear disciplined German voices cracking with stress. One radio operator from a coastal battery radioed inland. "We are hearing heavy movement behind us. Please advise." The response from HQ was, "Hold position." "Investigate rear." The operator replied, "We cannot investigate. We are taking fire from the hedgerows." Who is firing? Is it partisans? HQ didn't know. They couldn't tell them that the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment had practically landed on top of them. This loss of communication meant that the local commanders, the majors and colonels on the ground, were left to fight their own private wars. They couldn't coordinate a counterattack. The SS doctrine relied on Auftragstaktik, mission-type tactics where junior officers had freedom to act. But you can only act if you know where the enemy is. In the dark, with lines cut, surrounded by dummies and real killers, the German precision dissolved into paranoia. Every shadow looked like an American. Every rustle in the bushes was a paratrooper. But the most terrifying realization for the SS was yet to come. It wasn't about the wires or the dummies. It was about where the paratroopers were actually heading. Around 4 a.m., a pattern finally started to emerge from the chaos, and it chilled the blood of the thoughtful German commanders. The paratroopers weren't just killing sentries and blowing up rail lines. They were seizing bridges. They were taking crossroads. They were securing the causeways that led from the beaches through the flooded marshlands. General Marks was one of the few who saw it. He looked at the map at the pins that were confirmed real. Sainte-Mère-Église, the Merdure River bridges, the exit roads from Utah Beach. He realized with horror that the Americans weren't there to invade the interior yet. They were there to open the door. "They are clearing the exits," he reportedly told his staff. "They are paving the road for an amphibious landing." This was the moment the raid theory died. You don't seize causeways for a raid. You seize causeways because you are expecting heavy armor to come out of the ocean. The realization hit the SS officers like a physical blow. The Atlantic Wall was useless. The Atlantic Wall was a crust. It was hard on the outside, facing the sea. But the paratroopers were now sitting behind that crust. When the invasion force hit the beaches at dawn, the German defenders would try to retreat or bring up reserves, and they would run straight into a wall of American paratroopers waiting for them. They were the hammer, and the paratroopers were the anvil. Radio traffic from the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, German paratroopers fighting American paratroopers, shifted from confusion to desperate tactical warnings. "Enemy holds the Lafayette Bridge. We cannot move the panzers across. We are blocked." Blocked. That was the word that kept coming up. The German army, built on mobility and speed, was being strangled in its own territory. They had the tanks, they had the men, but they couldn't get them to the fight. And the one force that could have swept the Americans away, the heavy SS Panzer divisions, was sitting silent, miles away, waiting for an order that wasn't coming. This brings us to the most infamous silence of D-Day, and the source of the greatest frustration for the SS commanders on the ground. The 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend and the Panzer Lehr Division were the knockout blow. They were elite, fanatical, and heavily armed. They were positioned inland, ready to race toward any invasion site and throw the Allies back into the sea. But as the sun began to rise and the scale of the airborne invasion became undeniable, these tanks sat with their engines cold. Why? Because Hitler was asleep. The command structure of the Third Reich had become so centralized, so paralyzed by fear of the Führer, that no one dared to release the strategic reserves without his personal approval. Field Marshal von Rundstedt, the commander-in-chief in the West, wanted to move the panzers at dawn. He saw the paratroopers. He saw the ships appearing on the horizon. He knew this was it. But the SS commanders loyal to Hitler refused to move without the code word. Radio logs show the frantic pleading from the front lines. A colonel near Caen radioed, "Where are the panzers? We have enemy airborne troops digging in. We can crush them now if we move. In 4 hours it will be too late." The response from the rear was bureaucratic insanity. "The Führer is resting. We cannot disturb him. We must wait for confirmation that this is the main effort." Imagine the rage of an SS officer in a bunker near Carentan, watching American gliders land with jeeps and anti-tank guns, knowing that he has a division of Tiger tanks 50 miles away that could run them over, but those tanks are parked because a dictator is taking a nap. They cursed the Americans, but the transcripts reveal they cursed their own high command even more. They watched their window of opportunity close, minute by minute. They knew that light infantry, paratroopers, are vulnerable only in the first few hours. Once they dig in, once they link up, they are immovable. And the Germans were wasting those hours. As dawn broke on June 6th, the full picture was revealed to the Germans, and it was worse than their worst nightmares. Major Werner Pluskat of the 352nd Infantry Division was in a coastal bunker overlooking Omaha Beach. He scanned the horizon with his binoculars. Through the mist, he didn't see a few ships. He saw a city on the sea, thousands of vessels, battleships, destroyers, landing craft. He grabbed the phone to call his headquarters. "It's the invasion!" he screamed. "There are 10,000 ships!" "Don't exaggerate, Pluskat," the officer at the other end replied. "I'm not exaggerating. The horizon is full of them." At that exact moment, the connection between the coast and the interior snapped. The paratroopers behind the lines had finished their work. The confusion of the night had served its purpose. The German army was now fighting in 2 directions at once. SS units moving toward the beaches to repel the landing boats were getting shot in the back by the 101st Airborne. Supply trucks carrying ammunition to the bunkers were hitting landmines planted by the 82nd. The fortress Europe had been turned into a cage. The radio traffic from SS units later that morning shifted from tactical reports to resignation. One message intercepted from a unit near Saint-Méry-Église simply said, "We are surrounded. Americans to the front, Americans to the rear. No contact with regiment." Fighting until end. The arrogance was gone. The dismissal of the dummy drops was gone. What remained was the cold, hard reality that they had been outsmarted. They had prepared for a boxing match, a frontal assault, and the Allies had brought a knife to a wrestling match. The paratroopers hadn't just taken land. They had taken away the German ability to think, to move, and to react. The Allied victory on D-Day wasn't just about the bravery of the men storming the beaches. It was made possible by the chaos sown in the dark hours before dawn. The SS officers and German commanders started the night of June 6th with supreme confidence. They ended it in ruins. Their reactions tell us a vital lesson about warfare and leadership. They failed because they were rigid. They failed because they filtered information to fit their pre-existing beliefs. They thought, it can't be an invasion because the weather is bad, so they ignored the evidence falling from the sky. They thought, it's just a raid, so they didn't wake the Panzers. By the time they accepted the truth that 13,000 men were behind them and an armada was in front of them, it was too late. The paratroopers had done their job. They had bought the time needed for the beachhead to survive. The panic in the voices of those SS officers on the radio wasn't just fear of death. It was the fear of men who realized they have lost control. They were the masters of Europe, the elite of the Reich, and they had been dismantled by men with rubber dolls, wire cutters, and the courage to jump into the pitch black of night. If you want to understand the real history of World War II, the history that isn't just dates on a map, but the voices of the men who were there, make sure you're subscribed to Hidden Horizon Hub. We are going to keep digging into these archives, finding the stories that change how you see the war. Click the bell, leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next one.